Thank you for joining us today. My name is Jessica Rowland, and I am the Program Specialist for Cal State Fullerton's Alumni Engagement. On behalf of the CSU Event Professional Network Executive Council, it's my pleasure to welcome each of you to our final day of the 9th Annual Conference. Whether you're attending for the first time or you've participated in our previous sessions or in past conferences, we hope you find today's content valuable. Before we begin, I want to share some of the information about the Event Professional Network. The CSU-EPN was founded in 2012 when Chris Landmark and the talented San Diego State events team invited event professionals from across the CSU system for a day-long workshop to discuss challenges, share best practices, and network with each other. As it was such a rewarding experience, it was decided to formalize the group and host an annual conference, taking place each year at a different CSU campus. The Executive Council was formed a few years later to to ensure the network continued to pay it forward and provide assistance to the new host campuses. In spite of the pressure of the pandemic and with the ongoing support of the CSU Advancement Academy, the 2020-2021 academic year proved to be another year of growth for our network. In the last year, we reached and maintained 100% participation from all 23 CSU campuses, as well as representatives from several UCs and private institutions. The names of the Executive Council representatives are all listed on the screen. If you're interested in serving on the Executive Council or one of these subcommittees, please feel free to reach out to Phyllis Gilrow and contact your campus representatives. In the last year, we've gained many resources to help keep the network connected, including a listserv where you can opt in to receive updates from the CSU-EPN, as well as post questions and challenges you're facing and receive feedback and answers from our members. We encourage you to connect with us on social media by joining us on the CSU-EPN Facebook or LinkedIn group, and follow us on our brand new Instagram. You can also explore recordings of our previous CSU-EPN programming on our YouTube channel. The links for all of these outlets can be found in the conference emails. And please be sure to share all the fun you've had this year by using the hashtag of CSUEPN21. Now I want to thank our Summer Series sponsors, Iconic Group, our Platinum sponsor, Marching Order, Socio, the Commencement Group, and Chameleon Creative. Your support has really enhanced this year's conference. I now want to welcome to the stage Doug Weiland to make a few remarks on behalf of the Iconic Group.
Thank you, Jessica. Good morning, everyone. We made it today for the CSU Event Professionals Network Conference. I'm Doug Weiland, Sales Manager for the Iconic Group, Grad Images, and Balfour. I must say, this is our first year collaborating with CSU-EPN, and we have greatly enjoyed our time. We look forward to many years of partnerships with you. Today, we are talking about what post-pandemic events look like. Several professionals will give insights and ideas on what they are planning on their campuses. It should be very fun and informational. You have all learned to hit the curveball this year, and the slider, and the knuckleball, and whatever pitch they can throw at you. Everything was reinvented, revised, and reinvented again. Policies were changed again and again, and your reaction time was days or hours, not weeks and months. Having been in the industry for over 35 years, I know, hard to believe, but I started when I was 7. I used to say I've seen everything, from the guest speaker that was allotted 7 minutes and took 45, to the pelican that landed on the stage at Pepperdine looking for his diploma. And then 2020 hit. I will no longer say I've seen it all. This past year, however, many event planners, schools, and companies stepped up, teamed up, and made lemonade out of lemons. Grad Images and Balfour made the decision early on to help our partners, to provide them virtual services and products to help ease the pain of not having in-person ceremonies or limited in-person ceremonies. We worked closely with our partners and developed grad slides for display and keepsakes. We made virtual celebration pages, virtual photo booths for graduates and their families. We made mosaics for many schools and designed a no-touch portrait station while adhering to all state and local protocols, so students could at least have something from their graduating year. We actually attended many in-person ceremonies this past summer, photographing over 200,000 grads at 1,200 schools across the nation. We photographed everything from full-on ceremonies to portrait sessions to mock stage crossings. Every school was different, had different ideas, and different goals and needs. Grad Images was able to adapt and change to each situation, personalizing every ceremony for our partners and giving the graduates their much needed and wanted personal attention. We photographed ceremonies at Texas Motor Speedway, Daytona, and even Indy. Man, those were fast ceremonies. Balfour was able to keep up with all orders for regalia, despite all the shipping and travel restrictions. Not one school was shorted their orders, and our online system stayed safe and secure. No one else was more prepared to help our partners than the Iconic Group. We are in the same boat this year. Who knows what the new Delta variant will hold? Who knows what new pitch is going to be thrown at you? But one thing is for sure, the Iconic Group will be there, helping in any way possible to make sure your graduates get that special feeling that comes with graduating from a prestigious university in California. We know everyone here is on high alert and ready to make those last-minute changes and revisions, no matter what pitch is thrown our way. With that, enjoy your final conference day today. I look forward to seeing some of you in our booth. Back to you, Jessica.
Thank you so much again, Doug. The CSU-EPN is committed to bringing event professionals with within the higher education together to develop industry's best practices, share our great event ideas, and most importantly, support one another. Membership to the Event Professional Network is free, so make sure, and is open to our CSU, UC, and private higher educational institutions within California. Make sure that you spread the word about membership and get all of your event professionals within the network. Lastly, we want to invite you all to join us for the CSU-EPN Awards Ceremony taking place just after today's session at 1:30 p.m. The link for the award platform will be emailed to you and presented at the end of the presentation. Now, I'd like to introduce Megan to the stage to begin today's session.
Thank you, Jessica. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Megan Smeeheisen, and I'm the Donor Relations Event Specialist at Cal Poly and San Luis Obispo. As event professionals, the past 16 months have likely been some of the most challenging and uncertain times in our careers. The event industry was completely upended, and our kitchen tables were turned into our main workspaces for much longer than probably any of us could imagine. While the pandemic isn't over yet and plans still seem to be constantly changing, our campuses are returning to in-person learning this fall, and with that comes staff repopulation and the expectation of in-person events. Today, we are addressing the future of the workspace and the ever-moving target that is post-pandemic event management. Today, you'll hear from our team who represent 4 CSUs and 1 UC on their plans for returning to campus, followed by a presentation from 2 of my colleagues who are responsible for creating and implementing their campus's plan for returning to in-person events. Then we will share case studies from UC San Diego and CSU East Bay. We will be using Mentimeter polling throughout the program, so please have that ready on another screen or device. You can go to menti.com and enter the code that you see on screen, or you can scan the QR code. I'm sure you noticed that today's conference is hosted on Zoom meeting instead of a webinar like past conference days. We're really hopeful that today's presentation will be collaborative and interactive. We really want to hear from you what's going on in your campuses, the things you're excited for, and maybe some of the challenges that you face as well. We welcome your comments and questions in the chat throughout the event, and you'll also be able to raise your hand and unmute yourself during the Q&A portions that follow each segment. With that, I'm going to ask my colleagues to turn on their cameras and introduce themselves. Helen, let's start with you.
Hi, I'm Helen Iniges. I'm the Director of Special Events at Cal Poly Pomona. Now on to Darlene.
Hi, everyone. I'm Darlene Schluter. I'm the Senior Director of Special Events and Protocol at UC San Diego, and I'm going to pass this on to Monica.
Good morning. I'm Monica Dahl, Director of University Events at Stanislaus Date. And now I'll pass it over to Courtney.
Hi, my name is Courtney Verbaker. I'm an event analyst in the Special Events Office at Cal State Northridge.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. I know for many, returning to campus workspace is a hot topic, and feelings can range from being excited to kind of get back to normal or some semblance of normal, to concerns about safety, frustrations with lack of clarity, or just kind of a general lack of interest in returning to long commutes and hunting for parking spaces on campus. For most of us, the decision for how and when staff return to campus was made by leadership, and today we'll share with you what our individual campus plans are. I can share that my division, along with many others on Cal Poly's campus, will be returning on September 1st. We have a very structured hybrid schedule that allows us to work 1 day a week remotely, but that one remote work day has to be pre-scheduled, and it's going to be the same day every week. Additionally, at least half of our team has to be on campus on any given day. With that, Helen, will you share what's the plan at Cal Poly Pomona?
Yes, at Cal Poly Pomona, we started back on June 1st with our phase 1 approach, with some staff returning to the office. Then July 1st came and we started into phase 2, where some additional staff returned to campus. And then our phase 3 actually begins next Monday, August 2nd, where 100% of our staff are going to return, and we're going to be working hybrid schedules amongst most of our divisions. So 3 days a week with 2 days at home. Darlene, what are you going to be doing?
UC San Diego, we are taking a phased approach, and most of our staff are still working remotely. We started off with our research, and then next we went into operational needs and then desire. So most of us are still working remotely, but we're hoping to see a pretty vibrant campus come September 1st. Additionally, our campus is not only coming back to campus with based on science, but also looking at opportunities to see how we can work a different way than we have in the past. So vice chancellors and departments have an opportunity to look at all their positions and determine, are there chances or opportunities for hybrid work schedules or flexible work schedules. So our campus created a new policy on flexible work arrangements. So departments are talking about those situations and if those work well. But another thing to note is our campus is highly residential and a vibrant community where we welcome guests. And come November, we're going to have a trolley station, 2 trolley stops on our campus. So we expect to see a good majority of people back on campus, probably 3 days or more on site. So that's basically what we're doing. And Monica, let's pass it over to you.
Thank you, Darlene. For Stanislaus State, we have a hybrid work schedule that is slowly being implemented. So the cabinet returned to campus on July 12th, and all of the managers started returning to campus on July 19th, with staff members returning to a hybrid schedule effective August 9th. We also have hybrid schedules, but they need to be consistent throughout the week. So if we're coming in on Tuesday, Wednesday, we need to come in on Tuesday, Wednesday every day. And we're expected to have our offices open for business during normal work hours. The offices are going to start opening for regular work hours on Wednesday, August 18th. That's it for Stan State. I'll turn it over to Courtney.
Thanks, Monica. For CSUN, currently administrators are working with staff to assign on-campus schedules, sort of based on operational needs. Some phased repopulation efforts have started this month and will continue to adjust and transition as we enter the fall semester. Currently, many people are working hybrid schedules with some members coming in a few days a week, but everything pretty much varies by division and department right now. Prior to performing any on-site work, everyone's required to complete their online return to campus training module, as well as a daily health screening every day that they come to campus. So now that we've heard from everyone here's campus plans, we want to hear from everyone else in the audience. So what is your school's or department's plan for returning to the campus workplace? Looks like mainly structured hybrid so far.
Which is what we're hearing a lot just within our own group as well, Courtney. So kind of makes sense. Awesome. It looks like it's kind of leveled out. So yeah, it looks like 42% of us have a structured hybrid schedule. A small group of us, about a quarter, returning to campus full time, and then about 32% have a hybrid schedule, or a flexible hybrid schedule, excuse me. Awesome. Well, now we're going to jump into the topic that's probably of most interest to everyone on this call right now is planning to the return of in-person events on campus. How to do it safely, how to do it well, and what are all the concerns and issues that we feel like we might face this fall. So before I turn it over to Helen and Monica, we want to hear from you again. During conference registration, we asked about event-related concerns, and most of the responses were related to changing protocol, perhaps lack of protocol, safety, some catering, and just general guest expectations. We're curious to see if your feelings have changed or if the trends are the same. So the next question will be, what is 1 or 2 words that describe your biggest concerns about hosting in-person events this fall? Food and beverage, masking, catering, Delta, absolutely. Catering, yes. I can say for our campus, catering is definitely a struggle. A lot of the student workforce that we would typically already have hired on for the summer, it's a little bit tough to get them back. Our poor caterer is also undergoing a massive renovation of their prep kitchen, so to kind of add difficulty onto difficulty, they're facing that as well. So it still looks like Delta and catering are the top ones, which I completely understand. All right, let's go to the next question. All right, so how are you feeling about the return of in-person events on campus? Are you happy and excited, nervous, maybe a little bit worried, confused, or overwhelmed? I think I'm kind of a mix of the happy emoji and SpongeBob, but could definitely be the Flintstone character depending on the day. Awesome. And I'm sure a lot of you, that confusion or feeling of being overwhelmed is stemming from, wanting to make sure that you're doing all the things the right way and following all these new protocols and procedures that have been put into place, or perhaps overwhelmed because we're a little short-staffed in certain areas. All right. All right, the next question. All right, and we're curious, what's the largest in-person event you're planning right now? I can speak for myself. The largest event we're currently planning is about 250 people. Helen or Monica, how about you?
So personally for my department, we have an event, our events are just sitting over 100, but some other areas on the campus are hosting some larger events. We have a large pumpkin fest that happens every year that looks like it might be coming back. So Monica, what about you?
Well, we are currently in planning stages for an event in August that's over 500 people. So we're deep into it and presenting a bunch of challenges, but we're working through them on a daily basis as things change. So certainly understand everybody's uncertainty and hesitation. It's been a challenge planning these in-person events, and certainly one that large does have a lot of obstacles right now.
It looks like a lot of you are hosting with events that are having more than 200 guests. So
absolutely. I'm surprised there might be 1 or 2 people that aren't planning any in-person events right now. And I don't know if I'm jealous or curious or what that feeling is, but it does look like there's some campuses that may not be working on any big ones right now. All right, and then our next question. What is the main type of event you're planning right now? I would say for me personally, probably 90% of the events we're doing are in person. How about you, Helen?
For my department, I would say about 75% of us of our events we're going to be in person for the fall. We are keeping a few events virtual just for the type of event they are. We decided it would stay best being virtual. Monica?
Yeah, we have a variety as well. We're not doing so many hybrid events. We have the president's fall address that will be a hybrid event. And most of them are either virtual or hybrid. So we just started putting our reservations in for the next semester. So we're looking at those events as they come in daily to figure out how we can support them.
Absolutely. It sounds like the rest of the group is kind of in the same boat as us. All right, and then I believe we just have one more polling question. And this is, it's open-ended. So what questions do you have regarding the return of in-person events? So Helen and Monica, as they present, are going to likely address a lot of some of the big questions and concerns, or at least share, what's happening on their campus. But if we can tailor this a little bit, we would love to.
I see a question in the chat about providing masks to attendees at events. We will have them available if needed, but we're asking that most people have their own, especially staff and students and faculty as they return, they'll have their own masks on. So that's what we're doing at Stan State.
Absolutely. We'll be providing masks as well at our events. And I think, it's kind of like you walk out of the house and you grab your phone and your keys and your mask. It's, you're so comfortable with, adding that to your bag. So, but we will absolutely have them available. All right. It looks like
a lot of good questions coming in.
A lot of great questions. And I know that we'll be addressing a few of these things kind of naturally in our presentation. And we can definitely circle back a little bit to some of them as well in the Q&A at the end of the event. Awesome. All right. Well, with that, Helen, I think we can turn it over to you.
Thank you. So, hi everyone, I'm Helen Iniges. I'm at Cal Poly Pomona. I'm the Director of Special Events there. So at Cal Poly Pomona, as soon as the pandemic hit, we brought together a group that focused in events and how COVID was affecting events. So the group began the beginning of how to kind of cancel the events, remove events, what was going to be the future. And then as things started to come back, this group became a focus of how to repopulate the events world. So this group's been meeting regularly to discuss, as things have been changing for us, what we're going to do. So we'll go start with the next slide. So at Cal Poly Pomona, we're going to be actually releasing an events repopulation best practices. We looked at calling it a best practices because for us, it's looking at it as a guideline for event planners on the campus, for the guidelines and kind of a base level of what the campus would like to require as they work on planning their fall events. So with our events repopulation, it first starts off with kind of guidance for pre-event planning. At this point, the campus is going to require all events are reserved through our 25 live system. This is so we can allow for tracking to make sure everything's got an extra sense of tracking on the back end for where the events are happening. Any off-campus event, we are going to now be asking that if it's going to include 200 or more attendees, it has to receive approval from their vice president prior to even planning the event. And then from there, we are also setting up that any event with 200 guests or more, so this is for on-campus or off-campus events, they have to now have a pre-planning meeting and a pre-event meeting. So we ask one meeting to be before they even start planning or creating RSVPs or anything like that. And then the other one's about a week before their event. They'll meet with representatives for events, our health and safety team, our actual health team and our doctors, and then representatives who specialize in kind of the protocol of the county and the state guidelines. And then we are actually asking if they can hold the events outdoors, that they try to, especially if they're trying to do food and beverage. And we're also putting out, I would like to add that we're still encouraging, if this event can be held virtually, to really consider holding it virtually. We want to only do in-person events if it is really needed for that type of event. And then on to my next point. So masking, we saw a couple of questions come in just a few minutes ago regarding masking. So for us, masking is going to be connected to our campus guidelines regarding masking, unless there is a different arrangement already made with our task force team. Currently, however, though, in LA County, masks are required for all indoor events. So any indoor events are going to have masks. They do have to provide masks as well. The campus has ordered enough masks to be able to support not just our offices and departments, but events that need masks. They can request the masks so they have them available for guests as they enter that event area. Social distancing is going to be the same thing, that the events must follow the current campus guidelines on social distancing. At this time, our campus does not have any social distancing guidelines. They're just asking that for that event or whatever the type of activity could be at the event, to place your best judgment in planning. A big kind of phrase we keep using is healthy distance. Like if you can add in a healthy distance at your event, that's what's recommended. So for example, we've given the advice of, okay, if you traditionally were using 48-inch tables, maybe up it to a 60-inch or 72-inch and have the less people to give in that extra spacing at your tables. Another big thing for us is PPE and cleaning. As I just mentioned, the campus did order extra supplies of masks, gloves, sanitizer, and they've even rented in all the sanitizer stands that events have the abilities to request or borrow, depending on the event they're trying to do. The campus has also put in a 30-minute break period is required in between an event, or if one big event is having a rotational attendees, to add in that 30-minute break in between the next set of attendees coming, to allow for cleaning, aeration within the room or the outdoor space. We've put that in. As I mentioned, all events will need to have masks available and sanitizer at their check-in areas. And then the large events will have to have sanitizer stands offered throughout your event space. On to my next slide, please. So a big one for the campus is going to be the requirement of RSVP lists. At this time, every event will have to maintain an RSVP list that includes a name, email, and phone number. And then following that event, there needs to be the list needs to be maintained and kept permanently. If there was any case we needed to follow up on that. Also, attendees will need to complete a campus health screener. Currently, our campus next week will be going to having 2 types of health screeners. One that is for any campus representatives, staff, student, faculty, and then there'll be 1 health screener dedicated for any guests coming onto campus. So those will be required to be completed before attending the event. For any event that's over 200 guests, we are requiring that they submit their RSVP list prior. 24 hours, we need to receive that list of who will be in attendance. Another big thing that we are doing at our campus, we're asking this following messaging to be included on any correspondence, whether it's an invite, email confirmation, directions with a follow-up email before the event. This is messaging that we are looking at. It's a standard health screening messaging where here in LA County, they had it as part of a screening procedures we can do. So the first message is, please do not attend the event if you're experiencing any COVID-19 symptoms or are under quarantine or isolation orders. For this messaging too, we've also gone ahead and put it up on A-frame signs so that it can be placed at the entrance of signs. It can also be printed in 8.5 by 11 and have on your check-in table. It's just another step in having reminders and a screening process on any event. The other messaging was actually asked for by our health team. It says, if you have a COVID-19 incident within 2 weeks of visiting Cal Poly Pomona, please contact healthscreener@cpp.edu immediately upon knowledge. This is to help our team that's going to be doing any tracking of cases or anything, to add that extra step of precaution where we are asking guests to let us know if there were any incidents. Another thing I thought to mention too, back on those campus screeners, one great thing we've done also is, in case somebody comes to the event and they forgot to complete that screener, we've set up signs and A-frames that can be used at the events that has a QR code right there, so that a guest can go ahead and scan the QR code and complete the screener right there before entering that event space. On to my next point. Food and beverage. We saw some questions on this one too. So we've been working closely with our food and beverage team. We have our own dedicated on-campus catering team ran by our foundation department. So they've been working all through the winter, the spring, and summer on different creative ways to offer meals offered in a safer context. So big one they've been doing for us is now doing individual hot food box lunches. Before, our box lunches were more just sandwiches and wraps, but now they have an extensive menu with probably about 30 plus items that are hot items that can be brought in individual box lunches. They set it up where the food is only handed over by an individual server. If there's a dietary restriction that's needed, that can still be met. And then those boxes get that person's individual name on, so it's specially done for them. In the box, it'll include their side, a dessert, and it includes all the utensils and any other condiments they might want that goes with that hot item that they're going to be offering. Our continental breakfast, they're now individually wrapping each pastry, breakfast bread, or anything. They've moved on to, instead of offering oatmeal in hot big containers, they now do the individual cups of oatmeal, and the recipient receives that cup with also a side cup of hot water that when they're ready, they add it to their oatmeal that they can eat. Our hard-boiled eggs are being individually packaged. And at this time, we're only offering whole fruit, no sliced fruit. So really, it's kind of a thing where items are laid out, guests kind of say what they would like, and it's put together on a plate and handed over to them. We've also removed any self-serve coffee and tea at this time. They will request coffee and tea through the server, and then the server will present them the coffee or the tea. And with it comes a baggie with any additional extras that you would need to make your coffee or tea with. We're not doing any self-serve buffets on campus. They are now doing buffets that are served to the guests, and they're also setting them up where there's a one-way directional line, and it's still spaced out. This is to avoid overcrowding. So they set it up where wherever it's going to be, there has to be one entrance and one exit as guests are grabbing their food. Another big thing the campus is not going to allow for the fall semester is food fundraising. This is a kind of a big thing on our campus, especially with our student clubs and orgs. It's where they can sell food and hand it out. At this point, we've just decided to pull back on that for fall semester. And as spring comes closer, we'll reevaluate if those type of food fundraising events can come back. On to the next point. So kind of some of the big changes that have affected Cal Poly Pomona. So as I mentioned in the beginning, 25 Live, we were actually about to go live completely with our 25 Live. We had just added it to the campus, but we were going live when the pandemic hit. So 25 Live never really actually had its big reveal and getting everybody signed. So we're in this kind of like re-promotion stage of using 25 Live. And we looked at this best practices guideline as a way to start getting people into the habit of using 25 Live and making sure their spaces are scheduled and their events are in that system. Another thing we're doing, we have discovered on our campus, we have a lot of our indoor spaces, our student center, our conference center are doing a little bit slower in coming back to campus, whether it's a staffing issue, building issues, there's a lot less indoor spaces to use right now. So to help with a lot of this space shortage, we're bringing in some semi-permanent tenting locations in and around campus that will be able to be reserved through our 25 Live system to allow for outdoor events. It's even being used for some academic classes. The biggest one too that's been kind of this campus changes, as I mentioned, the lack of staffing. We're having to bring back staff, get staff retrained, especially within our student union, where a lot of it's supported by students. A lot of those students have left. So they're going through a case right now of getting everybody retrained, which is causing them that little bit slower to return to campus. So those are kind of some of the things we've had to go and discuss as we built the best practice for how is it really going to best help the campus and what can we do to help people still do what they need to do for events, but then also help the campus repopulate as well. So that's us. That's it for me from Cal Poly Pomona. I'm going to turn it over to Monica with Stanislaus State.
Thank you, Helen. It's always interesting to hear what other campuses' challenges are and struggles. And I think it's nice to know that we're all in the same boat to some degree. At Stanislaus State, we've had, before we decided to come back to campus, our president had formed committees. There was a fall committee for COVID. And one of those committees was a subcommittee for events. And I was co-chairing that committee. So throughout the COVID crisis, we were meeting regularly and discussing the issues related to events that COVID has put upon us. So the last thing we did as a group was we prepared a draft of protocols for events that we wanted the VPs to sign off on. So that protocol came out last Friday. And so 25 Live opened this Monday for scheduling. So we're seeing an increase in those events coming through. For our protocols for COVID on our campus, we decided that all event attendees must also complete the daily screening. We have one for students, faculty, and staff, and then we also have one for off-campus attendees as well. For the events that include any off-campus guests, we do ask that those are by invitation only and that RSVP is required. And that's so that if we did have an outbreak, we could easily find those guests from off-campus and turn that information over to the county as required. For the off-campus guests, they do need to do the daily screening when they come to campus prior to coming to campus. We also will have signage around campus with the QR codes. So people who come to campus and forget can do that QR code prior to entering the event. Our campus is requiring face covering be worn at all times indoors, and we are physically distancing to 3 feet for indoor and outdoor activities. We ask that when we're setting up for an event that you keep that physical distance guideline in mind, and in 25 Live, we use that as well at our campus. We have some layouts that have that physical distancing of 3 feet in there. And the room capacities have been adjusted as well. So that's what we have so far. My next point is about student gatherings. So we have a separate group in student affairs that involves many people around campus, including myself, that are still talking about the process and protocols for planned student activities as they have different challenges and requirements. So that guideline hasn't come out yet, but we're anticipating it will come out in the next week. We have instituted an event approval process. Prior to COVID, you could just go into 25 Live and submit your event, and then there would be tasks in 25 Live that different areas would sign off on. We now are requiring that anything other than a meeting with just campus attendees and no food, that you have VP approval prior to submitting that in 25 Live. Different area VPs, including the provost, have different ways of submitting for that approval. Most of them are just emailing approvals. And then we ask that once you get into 25 Live and you start putting your reservation in, that you have that pre-approval available to attach to your reservation so that we can see that when we go into 25 Live to sign off on our tasks. My next point is that they can go through the 25 Live. We wanted to call it a pre-approval for our vice presidents because we felt like the word approval then would imply that it's approved. You don't have to worry about anything else. And we utilize 25 Live pretty completely in different areas around campus, such as risk management, events, university police will get tasks when those events are entered, and they have to individually sign off on their tasks. So the VP is a pre-approval, and all of the tasks have to be completed in 25 Live before your event is considered confirmed. Like other campuses, catering has been a challenge. Our staff for our caterers was decimated with 25 Live. We had a director of dining services, and we had some cooks on campus over the COVID period. The cooks were mainly providing food to the students that were still in housing over that period. So as we began to talk about repopulation for fall, we realized that catering, our Chartwells, our partners on campus, really needed to build up their staff. So part of those protocols we developed were that there are no self-serve or buffets for food service. We ask that if you're serving a meal, that you can request that meal be plated and served by our Chartwell staff, and individually boxed meals will be available and preferred. I met with them yesterday, and they are coming out with a contactless catering menu, which will help with those events that need to do box meals. There'll be more options available for campus people to choose from. And on our campus, we are prohibiting potlucks at this time because by nature, it's kind of a buffet and it's hard to, physical distancing isn't really encouraged through potluck activities. So unfortunately, we aren't having those at this time. On to my next point. Some of the changes we've had for the events repopulation are face coverings must be worn during indoor gatherings at all times. Again, our vice presidents will need to do a pre-approval for events that are not meetings without food. And you have to physically set up 3 feet of physical distancing for our events on our campus. So that's pretty much what we're doing at Stanislaus State. I think, Helen, if you want to come back, we can kind of compare the two campuses and see what differences we have and what things we're doing alike.
So some of the differences for us with Cal Poly Pomona, we are going to be having vice president pre-approval for only 200 plus guest events off-site.
And at Stan State, again, we're doing it for anything outside of a meeting with campus attendees.
At Cal Poly, we're going to be issuing what we call a best practice guidelines.
And at Stan State, we have the COVID-19 event protocols.
For as of right now, we have masking is required at all indoor events.
And we're following the same procedure at Stan State.
For us at this time, we are not going to be issuing any social distancing for events, but we ask everybody to use their best judgment.
And we have instituted 3 feet of physical distancing.
And then for Cal Poly, we are asking for a 30-minute break period in between any event or activity.
And I reached out to our facilities team, and they have determined that we do not need a break period between our events.
For us, we are going to be asking that all events maintain an attendee list before the event and then keep it permanently after that event.
And at Stan State, we're just doing it for events with off-campus attendees.
It looks like we're both going to be using the campus screener for all of our event attendees.
And yeah, ours is required every day for faculty and staff and students who come to campus anyway. So that's what we're doing at Stan State.
And then the big difference for us is food and beverage. So we're just not allowing food fundraising events.
And for us, no buffets, self-serve buffets or potlucks.
Perfect. On to the next one. So some of the big things that we have been putting out to our teams, both Monica and I, is to be flexible. We're pretty much putting these best practices out or the guidelines from Monica, and we're asking everybody to be flexible, except that probably change is inevitable. The protocols or our practices are going to be needed to be constantly updated to meet the changing COVID guidelines. As many mentioned in the previous Mentee polls, the Delta variant's coming up. So we are definitely both putting out cautions to anybody planning their events to be prepared that you need to plan flexible plans. I put out to my planners right now of plan A, B, and C. You better have a plan to go backwards. Your B plan, you're perfect. Your C plan is if things open up a little more. Just plan with multiple options. Also plan ahead. There is a lot more requirements, a lot more planning, a lot more messaging that needs to go out. So that extra time needs to be brought in the planning. It's not the same as we were probably doing before the pandemic. We need to add a little bit of extra time to really make sure everything gets covered. And then another thing we put together is plan with grace. As we both mentioned, we each have staffing difficulties or space difficulties on our campus right now. We're calling it plan with grace. We are saying to have an understanding that there's either these staffing shortages, room shortages, whatever it may be, and that really is going to affect the planning of how events are done pre-pandemic and now. Monica?
Thank you for that, Helen. My next point will be that teamwork. We're going to talk about this, but one of the takeaways from the pandemic, and luckily on our campus, we had it prior to the pandemic, but is really teamwork. Expand your event team to include members of campus who you work with on a regular basis to have successful events. We at Stan State meet regularly with our facilities department, our safety and risk management department, and all other campuses around, all our other people around campus to make sure that we're following their guidelines and that when we're meeting with people about events that we make sure that we know where they're having challenges so we can advise differently, or we can work together when we come to put out these guidelines and protocols or anything else that we need to do at our campus. Following COVID, we're going to be creating a campus work group. So it'll be an event work group that will meet weekly. We used to do meetings prior to COVID every week with areas around campus. Now we're going to make it a work group officially. And we'll be having members of facilities, members of catering, members of risk management, university police, parking. All of those people will be on that work group so that we can meet with people and look at the events that are coming up from the beginning. So as soon as we see a new event, if we think it has some potential for challenges that we need to discuss, we'll pull that event planner into this meeting and we can all talk to them about what recommendations we have or what tweaks we need, so that they can go into their event planning process knowing what they need to look for, instead of talking to them at the end of the event planning process when maybe it's too late to go back and change anything. So we're lucky at Stan State. We have a great working relationship with all of our campus partners, and we look forward to continuing that. The next point.
Now we're going to bring back Megan. There she is.
So now we have some time for Q&A. So please feel free to drop any specific questions in the chat or raise your hand. We had a lot of great questions that were up on that Menti slide, and some other questions we wanted to address. So I'll just kind of kick it off. And I saw a few questions related to the enforcement of mask policies on campus at events. So Monica, Helen, how are your teams enforcing? Are you enforcing? Tell us a little bit about that.
Go ahead, Helen.
Okay, I'll take this one. It's funny because we just actually had our Events Repopulation Committee meeting yesterday, and this was a big topic of discussion, is enforcement. The campus in general is working on different things for masking enforcement in different areas, whether it's within classes, within the office, different things of what they're seeing, what could be done. Right now, we have not asked we're not going to ask event planners that they have to be, say, mask police. We are asking them, though, to be communicative. Communicate out that this event's going to involve a mask. Put it all out there so that it's clearly stated. And then if they feel comfortable, they can ask them that this is a mask only event, like the masking is required, and go in it from that way. We're going to go with that flow for the first bit, see how the first events go that do have masks required, and build on it from there. As we've always said, be flexible. It's a learning time right now, but right now we're not going to put our planners in a position where they have to be the police enforcers of masking, but more that we're saying, put it out there from day one of that event being known, that will be a mask required event.
We're doing the same thing at Stanislaus State, kind of wait and see approach. We aren't asking our event planners to enforce it. We're just trying to do a social norming campaign at Stanislaus State, where it would be the normal thing to see people in masks around campus. And so anyone that wasn't wearing a mask might feel like they're not following along with what everybody else is doing. So maybe they'll be encouraged to put their masks on. So that's kind of what we're doing at Stan State as well.
I love that idea, Monica. Like, no one wants to be the odd man out in that way, right? I can say for Cal Poly and SLO, that's also the direction we have been given at this point is, it's our responsibility to communicate, put out all of the expectations of guest behavior and whatever those requirements are. But when, at least for us too, like, we're in donor relations, so we're inviting some very important people to campus, and we want them to enjoy themselves, but we also want to create a very safe event for everyone. So it can be a little bit challenging, but I think communication is key to everything. So our next question is about the size of the review team. I think, Helen, this might be for you, but I think, Monica, it could apply to you as well, about the size of the review team who are reviewing the events as they're submitted.
Yeah, so the team for us right now is there's a standard 4. It's myself for the event side of it. We have our director of EHS, or environmental health and safety. We have our lead doctor of the health center. And then we have another person on who specializes more on what's been the county protocols and state protocols. We do add in others depending on what the event request is coming in. It could be our food and beverage specialist comes in. Our risk manager is also one who rotates in, just depending on that event. So that's been our group. That group we established very early on, because we've been doing this practice already for drive-in or drive-through events that have been heavily done through the campus through the spring.
Yeah, similarly, we don't have that work group that's going to approve events. VPs are going to be doing that. But like Helen said, prior to the fall planning, we did have a work group, a loose group of people that would meet and discuss requests to do in-person events. Prior to the fall, we didn't have any in-person events other than academic related activities that needed to take place. And so a lot of us were members of the EOC. So we were used to working together, but it was basically myself. We have safety and risk management, which encompasses our EHS people as well. They're all in one division. And so a lot of us would meet and discuss what exceptions were being requested and how they could safely do that event, or if it needs to remain a virtual event. So that's kind of what we did. And then our work group moving forward will address any specific issues about an event.
Okay, awesome, thank you. Catherine submitted a question in the chat and said, with the shift of the Delta variant, how are you determining your go or no-go in-person events, either pivoting to virtual or canceling fully?
Do you want me to start answering that one? I'll take this one. For now, we haven't, we've been watching the Delta variant and the cases that it will increase in our county. Our risk managers is on top of that on a daily basis, and she communicates with me, and then we go to cabinet for approval of any changes we need to make. So again, we're being flexible. Right now, these are the guidelines that we have, but if things get worse, we may have to pull back and reassess what we were doing face-to-face. So that's kind of how we're taking it as an approach.
Yeah, for us on campus, as I mentioned previously, like we are putting out recommendation planners, plan A, B, and C. We are going into a time where we're not sure right now. So we are asking them to plan with possibly the step that they need to go back to virtual or however that event can be done. For us on our campus, it's decided amongst our task force, which is members from all over campus. They'll make the call and then it'll come down from there, whatever is changing in the best practices of what we're now allowing or what's being removed or added on.
I'm stealing your A, B, and C point, by the way. I just wrote a little note myself.
Well, that's what this is all about, right? Is to hear what others are doing and say like, oh, wow, that's a great idea. I either didn't think about that or that would work perfectly on my campus. I don't know if it's even been thought of yet. So we're glad we're already thought sharing. Had a question about how does your campus screenings for staff differ from the screening that you will offer for guests, the health screenings for guest events? I know, Helen, you mentioned that you're still kind of in the process of working out the campus guest health screening.
So for us, the difference between the staff and faculty, student one to the guest one, the staff, student, faculty have to answer a couple more questions. However, I think on this newest update that's going to go next week, we're actually removing the request of location because we're back to 100% on campus. There's another system that's going to be used to track everybody's location. On the guest screener, though, this is something that will be staying. We need to know whether what building they're going to. We're even adding what event are they going to, just to help know that where are they going to be on campus. It's in the connection of like 25 Live, knowing where that event is so that we know where they have been on campus in case there was an incident. It helps for our tracking purposes.
And for us, yeah, they're both pretty basic. It asks if you have the temperature, if you've had any symptoms, that kind of stuff. So they're pretty much the same for both groups. A little bit more questions again for the faculty, staff, student ones.
Okay, awesome, great. Can both of you speak to the resources that you use to inform your decisions and in creating your best practices guides?
Yeah, I can go on that one. So as I mentioned earlier, Cal Poly Pomona, we're part of LA County. I do think during the pandemic, they've had some of the strictest requirements. We've also been at some of the worst sometimes. So when we built the practices, they were built stemming from the appendices that had been out there for us previously. So for reference, they were Appendix BB and CC. They gave guidelines and rulings for how events needed to be set up, whether it was a planned gathering, meaning there was an invite Rsvp list, or not like an unplanned social gathering. So those are what the differences were between those. But that's a lot of how we built our best practices. We took the main topics of those appendices and we took over also those previous requests. For example, we're asking for a 30-minute break period in between event space usage. Back when these appendices were still in use, they were requiring a 2-hour period in between the use of those spaces. So we kind of took some of those guidelines and applied those. We also, for our county, they have a best practices right now. There's no guidelines from our county other than our masking at this point, but they listed out currently on their site, they list out what they're calling their recommendations, their best practices. So the group has reviewed those, and of course the state ones as well. And that's what helped to kind of give the base of where we went for our best practices for the campus.
Awesome. I know if anyone has questions about the appendices in LA County, Helen I think, has them all memorized by this point. You're the expert for sure. Monica, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, we're similar. We refer to the state guidelines, the Cal OSHA guidelines, and any county guidelines that we have as well before we make these decisions.
Awesome. We had another question submitted about 25 Live. I know my campus uses it. I know it sounds like both of yours do as well. Does it include an outward facing public calendar of events or a public dashboard?
I'll take that one.
I think you get that one.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Helen and I have talked about 25 Live quite a bit. So we do have a public facing calendar, and it's on the main page of our website, and the events that are confirmed will be promoted there. In 25 Live, there's a question about how you want your event promoted, and you can check off those boxes. And then we do have that calendar that is a public facing calendar on our site. So all of our events are posted through that.
And the same for us. One thing we've added, and I don't know, Monica, if yours, we, and as I said, we're still just debuting our 25 Live as it's coming on, but we were able to build in a virtual event so that if you wanted your virtual event to be on the main calendar too, we built that as an option just to make sure that our virtual events were still getting promoted as well. So if those stay through the fall, they can have that option to put their virtual event on the calendar as well.
Yeah, for our purposes, we treat all events, virtual or face-to-face, the same so that you can promote it equally.
And I think we have time for maybe one more question, and forgive me if this was covered in either of your presentations, but we had a couple of questions regarding vaccination status or not. And if you are asking that in any of your registration forms for events, or if your campuses have decided to forgo that question entirely.
For us at this point, we are still discussing it. As I think many people on the call know, there was some bigger changes this week for the CSU. So the groups on campus that are brought together to discuss this are still discussing how this will affect events. But at this time, we are not addressing vaccination status within our best practices guideline.
And similarly at Stanislaus State, the requirement just came out this week. So I know we're working on modules where staff and students and faculty can go and upload their vaccination cards confidentially. And so that's still in the works for our campus, but I think it should come out in the next week or so.
Got it. But at this point in time, as far as off-campus guests or campus visitors, you have no current plan to require proof of vaccination or at least knowledge of the vaccination status, correct?
Correct.
Correct.
All right. Awesome. Well, unless anyone wants to throw in a quick question into the chat, I think we will wrap up this section. Monica, Helen, thank you both so much for sharing your campus plans and all the time that you've put into today. So thank you again. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Rich Waters from CSU East Bay, who is going to share a little bit about a successful event and a big one at that he recently had on his campus. So Rich, thank you so much for joining us. Can't wait to hear about your recent event.
Thank you, Megan. So I was asked today to kind of share a large event that we were charged to do at East Bay that was kind of a last minute surprise. So our president, in wanting to prepare people to come back to campus for repopulation, wanted to host a welcome back barbecue. And originally I was told in about probably early April that this would be coming. And so the intent was that it would probably be in August before school started. And then they would get back to me after our commencement in mid-May. Then towards the beginning or mid-May, it was thrust upon me that no, the president wants to do it in June because that's when MPPs were required to be on campus full time, and she wanted it then. So that dropped us down to about a 3-week preparation time. So some of the challenges that we faced was certainly the short time frame that we had originally thought from it would be in August and it was going to be done in June. As you all know, the COVID restrictions were still in effect, and for our county, in Alameda County, was still pretty strict as far as masking and social distancing and no large events as well. The other thing we had to deal with was the governor's June 15th announcement that California was going to be open for business, and we thought, based on his message, was back to normal. And then, of course, we had Cal OSHA who entered into the mix, saying, well, no, that's not exactly what we're going to accept with the governor's message. So I had to balance all these conflicting messages that were happening. From my campus, there was no direction on the decisions coming from my cabinet or even our risk management. They all weren't on the same page. And risk management was trying to figure out how to interpret the OSHA standards that were going to be coming out, how to incorporate the June 15th message, and then, of course, our Alameda County direction as well. So, and again, I mentioned we had about 3 weeks to figure this all out. So the plan was, it was going to be a Friday event from 11:30 to 1. The president wanted it a barbecue style and it to be upbeat and happy. So we have plenty of outside space. So we identified a space outside that would be able to accommodate all of the people that we would expect. Now, typically on a given year, we have a post-commencement barbecue that is kind of a thank you for our faculty and staff for working. And we usually get about maybe 300 people for that. And it's done on a day that's typically has a lot of population, like a Tuesday or Thursday. So for a Friday, I told the president we most likely won't get a lot of people because Fridays are very sparse here, especially during COVID, because hardly anyone's on campus. So not to expect too many people. So we had to deal with what the challenge of actual number was going to be. We did do an RSVP that was required to attend the event, and the initial planning was we would set the tables to accommodate for social distancing. They would be 6 feet apart, and there'd be about 2 people per table. And we were able to use what the on-campus, what our facilities department had. Well, it kind of turned out that we had over 300 people RSVP, so it was way more than what we anticipated. That means that our campus people were specifically going to come to campus for this particular event, which was an anomaly. We had about 270 people attend. People sat in groups. They didn't adhere to the 2 per table, which was fine. We anticipated for that. But it means that we over-ordered on the number of tables and chairs we had. Originally, when I got that 300 count, I realized we had to order tables and chairs to be able to accommodate for the social distancing. At that time, the OSHA had not finalized their plans on what the requirements were going to be for staffing and masking requirements. They anticipated it would be X and it wouldn't be into implementation until after our event. But the campus did indicate to us that since it was outside, that masks would be optional. Again, I will mention, once the day of the event happened, most of the people weren't wearing masks outside, and people were sitting with their group of friends at the tables. The food setup was like a buffet style, and it was what Helen mentioned before. What they were doing is the catering provided you with kind of the box with the entree in it, and then everything else was added to it. So it was a prepackaged coleslaw or prepackaged potato salad, the prepackaged cookie, prepackaged muffin. So it was all kind of them providing it in the box, and then you take the box back to your seat. Most people that were in line for food, it went relatively fast. Most people were keeping about a 3-foot distance. So that was all in the honor system. And the event went pretty well. And this was, again, June 18th. So it was before all of the Delta variant was happening. So kind of some of the takeaways, as we move forward. For our campus, the protocols and practices were continuing to change. There was no, our risk management department wasn't empowered to make decisions. There was conflicting messages from our CFO, who was in charge of risk management or oversaw risk management. And there was conflicting messages between the president's office and the CFO. So I had to navigate what to do. And basically, I had to make executive decisions. And moving forward, we're still in that type of situation. Our risk management does have a template that they want us to use, but it's really general. And it's, again, asking me as the event planner, well, how do you propose to mitigate some of these issues? I would say as a takeaway is having some backup plans. Originally, we were anticipating that the numbers would be really low, and we ended up having twice as many people as what we had expected to actually show up. So the backup plans really is around how much furniture we have, space, and even tents for sun coverage. The other thing is managing expectations. And in this case, it was really about managing my president's expectations. She's a new president, so she didn't have any precedence of how things were done in the past, and what her ideas of how many people would be showing up, and how decisions are made on this campus and how we do things. So really moving forward, it's kind of managing her expectations and providing the pitfalls and potential pitfalls that we typically go through. So that's kind of the quick and dirty version of the event that we produced back in June.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rich. We really appreciate you taking the time sharing that with us. And I'm sure we will have quite a few questions ready for you at the Q&A section. But for now, we're going to pass it over to Darlene. Darlene is going to share some of the really innovative and cool things that have happened and will happen on UC San Diego's campus. So Darlene, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Megan. Hi, everyone. Again, I'm Darlene Schlueter. I'm the Senior Director of Special Events and Protocol at UC San Diego. I'm also one of the staff members who served on the committee to build an events and activities intake form to manage all our event submissions over this last spring quarter. And they also took into consideration event and safety protocols around COVID. On our campus this last year, we had 6,000 undergraduate students, and our campus did a really great job of keeping our COVID number cases down. We were doing testing, things were working really well, but our leadership knew that spring break was just around the corner, and that if we didn't provide in-person opportunities for them, that they would leave campus and then possibly jeopardize all the progress that we have made. So our campus received a one-time authorization to put together a spring break Stay Safe by Staying Put initiative, and that took place from March 21st through the 28th. We offered 80 events to our students, and some were hybrid and virtual and in person. At this time, we had Recreation, who was already doing activities outside. They already had pre-approval. So we were able to add 12 new events. On the next slide, we had to come up with the process quickly to figure out how to manage these events and what to do. So we used a form called Kuali form, which had approval processes involved and different questions. So on the next slide. So in addition to those health and safety acknowledgements, we also had very specific questions. Anything about sanitation and different supplies and where to wash your hands. The next slide. So in addition to all of those safety protocols, the form asked for all the basic information, time, place, details, and then all the safety protocols that we put in place. The other part that we added in was the approval process. So the quality form allowed us to set up different notifications and approvals. Folks from the COVID-19 task force, they were part of the approval process. They did kind of this prelim review. And then our emergency operations committee center, they also did review. The appropriate vice chancellors reviewed. We had different pathways for student organizations and departments. And so then we also had auto emails that went out. So if you submitted, it was details about the event. You received an email about if your event was approved and the steps you needed to take to help to mitigate risk, and then different denials. And we came up with different reasons why an event would be denied, as well as give an opportunity to the vice chancellor to say why it was denied. So on the next slide, you'll see the events and activities intake form was behind us, our single sign-on, and we offered during that spring break, in-person and distribution. So distribution would be like a paint supply pickup or some kind of activity. And the next slide. We also put together a campus events and activities portal, which laid out the framework for our events and activities. It was kind of a how-to, it linked to our return to learn information where that was together from leadership information and details about masking, capacity. And so it was just a one place where everybody could go to find their information. You'll see on the next slide that this was the launch of the COVID-19 intake form. So just to recap, kind of what I shared right now was on March 3rd, our campus successfully launched the first phase of the events and activities intake form. We used it building Koali Build. That form allowed us to have the different approvals and the workflows. Our campus worked with the University of Events COVID-19 Events Task Force and also the EOC, and they contributed to the expertise and the business operations and the decisions we made. So our group came up with kind of some ideas, and then we worked with them and consulted with them on a regular basis. The pilot was very successful, and so that allowed our leadership to expand it to the rest of the campus. So on April 15th, opportunities for limited in-person events for our students, staff, and faculty became available for the following type of events. Graduations, everybody was wanting to have graduations at that time. As a matter of fact, we had an in-person graduation. We were the only UC to do an in-person graduation with 10,000 guests over the entire weekend. And then, and everybody had to show proof of a vaccination or a proof of testing, as well as wear a mask. Everyone complied. We had a really safe and successful event, and we're able to mitigate risk there. Also, we allowed dance practices. We have a lot of student dance organizations, so we allowed them to dance outside. Filming, we found that people wanted to do a lot of filming. We were getting production companies, bringing them to campus, and then we're broadcasting them live, usually over Zoom or YouTube. And that was quite, that seemed to come up pretty often. And then the package and the distribution, like I said, and then speaker engagements and retirement celebrations. I'm sure like many of your campuses, everybody does their retirement celebrations at the end of the year. And so we saw a lot of those as well. So on the next slide, just to recap, for that spring break, so from that March to June, we saw 227 events that were submitted through the intake form. On the next slide, I just kind of will show you a little breakdown. Like you can imagine, most of our events that were submitted were in person, followed by distribution. Like I said, we were getting a lot of filming. People were broadcasting things live, and then co-curricular. Co-curricular was intended for student organizations who needed to be on campus because they were working on a specific project. Maybe it was like the submarine club or an engineering group who were working on some kind of competition that they could not do over Zoom. So that's just kind of a breakdown of the events we saw this last quarter. And that leads us to where we are now. So effective immediately, events on and off campus are subject to the same guidelines laid out as California Department of Public Health, kind of like how my colleagues have talked about earlier today. Masking is still required for all indoor events and meetings. Mega events, we're following that 5,000 and 10,000 with special guidance. In addition to that, we have some protocols around security. So once we hit that 3,000 number, it becomes a mega event for us regardless. And then we are continuing to use our symptom screening. And then all planners need to complete this events and activities intake form for any event taking place on our campus. So it's any meeting exceeding 10 participants. And prior to COVID, we had a major events protocol that said any event with 100 people or alcohol were required to complete a major events protocol form. So we're kind of just taking over that and then moving to this event intake form. So then that leads me to the next slide, the next steps. So we are definitely planning for 2021 fall events. We have so many events across the campus. In my department alone, we have tons. We are, I think I mentioned earlier, that we are having a trolley grand opening and first riders in mid-November. We are hoping to have 10,000 people on campus, a community event. We have Welcome Week planned. We have a founder celebration. We are hoping to bring back a homecoming, like during homecoming, we are doing a staff celebration within that week, hoping for about 5,000 staff to participate. But we're also thinking about all different scenarios: in person, pickup, hybrid, outdoor, and we are coming up with scenario A, B, and C, like you all mentioned earlier as well. And then also, we continue to receive guidance from our leadership. Most recently, we received information about vaccination status for staff and the mandate, like many of my CSU colleagues here. And we received more information and more guidance, and we're just going to see how that impacts our event planning as well. We are continuing to work with our EOC group. They've been very great partners, and we are constantly modifying this event intake form for all these changing guidelines. So I know there's so many questions and everyone's just kind of learning what's going on. And I'm going to stick around for the Q&A, and I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Adrian.
Thanks, Darlene. Hi, everyone. I'm Adrian. I'm going to help facilitate some questions and answers, questions you guys might have for both Rich and Darlene. Darlene, we did have a question come in today regarding the collection of proof of vaccination and negative tests. How were you able to collect those? And was this something done ahead of the event or as guests arrived?
Yeah, so when students signed up, they had to sign up. They were going to participate in commencement. They were aware of our guidelines. They were allowed to bring 2 guests. And if those 2 guests did not also show those documents, they would not be allowed in. So everybody was aware ahead of time. We sent so many emails. There were signage everywhere. In addition to that, our campus has some student ambassadors who helped assist. So at check-in, it was gated, and we had hired a security company, and they were making sure people had their stuff ready, as well as staff volunteers. And then right before people were let in with the bag check with security, we had the health ambassadors making sure everything was out. So there was constant checks along the way, and we actually had no issues with people not wanting a mask. So that was great. And overall, it was a really, really successful day.
I would say the only issue was a lot of lost vaccination cards that got turned into lost and found, right?
Yes.
Rich, I had a question for you. One of your points in your presentations was that you were managing your president's expectations. With expectations kind of all across the board with leadership right now, what tactics did you take to manage those expectations to make sure that, 1, your president was happy, but 2, also kind of falling in line with the policies and protocols that were in place? How did you do that?
Well, that was difficult because, again, she was about 5 months into her role, and the way we used to communicate with the president, or the way I used to communicate with the president, was through my boss, the VP, and it was kind of like he was the middleman. And then through this transition, her coming in, she was more of a, or he wanted us to be able to speak directly to the president. So I was still trying to figure out when I communicate with her directly versus her chief of staff communicating with me. And finally, I got to a point where I would just communicate directly with her on everything. So I knew exactly what her expectations were. Because at that point, the senior administrators were still trying to figure out their status and their situation with her. So it was difficult to manage. And it was a unique situation because of her transition into the institution. But typically it's just a matter of being upfront and saying, well, this is how we've done things in the past. This is what I would expect. And then giving the caveat, but we are in a unique situation. And she was pretty reasonable and understanding.
Wow, that's nice. You're lucky. I think it kind of goes back to us having that concern about, are we event planners? Are we policing? And then how do we keep our leadership happy, right? We're kind of always stuck in that weird spot. Darlene, how did you keep your case numbers down while students were on campus?
Yeah, right away, our campus had a really robust process. They quickly developed a process and a team called Return to Learn. And it was made of physicians on campus, as well as our leadership and emergency operations, the COVID events task force. We were doing testing. And I think Adrienne could speak to this as well. She has a lot of background. She helped develop our move-in process where students had to be tested. They were tested on a regular basis, as well as staff. People lived they were able to go into pods. So at first it was called Three's Company. So you could hang out with your pod of 3. It later moved to 10 people. So we were very, very consistent with that. We added some testing that you could get through vending machines with quick turnaround. We had testing sites all over campus with those vending machines, as well as offsite locations. And Adrienne, if you want to add anything.
Yeah, and I think also it's really helpful that UC San Diego operated their own testing. So we had our own lab. So it wasn't, we weren't having to go through the county or anything. So, we were really lucky in that regard. And as, okay, my cat's wanting to make an appearance, sorry. As Darlene mentioned, during our move-in process, we moved in about 8,000 students in last September. So kind of when everything was at the height. And we worked with student health and our UCSD health teams and did kind of a robust drive-through testing site that everyone had to get tested before they were able to actually move in. So we were having families come in their Suburbans, in their, their moving trucks with all the stuff, getting their nose swabbed. And then they basically, if they tested positive, they would then get transferred into isolation housing. And then we did this also for a lot of international students, where international students would come over, get tested, and they would stay in isolation housing for 2 weeks, regardless of their test results. So we, like Darlene mentioned, we had a very, very robust testing policies and protocols, and it worked out really, really well.
Yeah, and I think if I could just add, and the students who are living on campus weren't necessarily taking classes on campus. Very, very few classes were happening on campus. And the ones that were outside, all our open realm spaces. We put up large tents, and then we had some limited class space outside. But most students living on campus were working remotely.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you. We had another question for Rich. What were attendees' thoughts on the barbecue and it being an in-person event? Did people buy into it? Were they excited? Did everyone like it? What was your kind of initial reaction? I think too, adding on to this question, what was the initial reaction when it was advertised? Did you get pushback, or were people like, thank God? How'd that go?
Yeah, no, it was, again, like I had mentioned, first of all, it was a Friday, so I didn't think there would be anyone wanting to come up. And then most of our staff, particularly our bargaining unit staff, have been preferring to work from home. So I was anticipating people not to be interested at all. So once the advertisement went out and we were collecting RSVPs, that's when I was surprised on the number, the interest of people that were signing up. So people were not expressing their hesitancy to come up. They were specifically coming up for the barbecue because it was on a Friday and they had no other reason to show up. And then when they got there, they enjoyed the interactions with staff and seeing people. I think that was part of it, not being on campus for a while. Certainly to have, free food and then the music. But it was good and people stayed around for the whole time pretty much. We had very few people that kind of grabbed lunch and went back to their office. So that was encouraging to see, and it was fun. So from what I can tell, there was no pushback. I didn't get any pushback, and I know the president's office didn't get any pushback either.
I have a comment. I have a comment to follow too. I was a little nervous when I heard Rich say in his presentation that more people showed up than he had anticipated. So is that something we should be thinking about in the future? Like when people didn't go to events and now we're going to see more people? It should be interesting.
Yeah.
Very good point. Very good point. Add that to our planning list, right? Rich, I think this question was asked in the prior presentation as well, and I think it's a great question for you as well, is what resources did you refer to formulate your plan?
Well, I was trying to get direction from our risk manager on what I needed to follow. What were the specifics? Was it a mask man? Are we requiring masks? Are we requiring screening? What signage do you want? Social distancing, spacing. I mean, I had no resources, put it that way. So what I had to rely on what were the current ordinances and mandates from the county and from OSHA and from CDC. And so basically that's where I kind of gauged on how to set everything up. Then when the June 15th order put into effect, and then the Cal OSHA started getting involved, saying, well, this is what we're thinking of changing it to, and the implementation wouldn't be till after the event. Then I pressed the administration for saying, okay, this is what I'm going to do, yay or nay, basically. So I took out the asking piece and I said, well, this is what it's going to be like. And then if they didn't like it, then they could tell me. So
it's a good tactic.
they were fine with that, although that puts the heat on me, which isn't fair, because if something went wrong, they would have said, well, you're the one who did it, you're the one who said it, rather than me getting the direction from them. So though, if that's what they meant by resources, that's what I had to utilize.
And then was your food served, or was it individually boxed?
It was served. So the way they did it is we had a cardboard container, and we had brisket, barbecue was brisket and pulled pork or pulled chicken, and then there was a vegan option. So what they did is, as people were coming up, they put in the hot entree, and then as you went down the station with them, they would put in the box, prepackaged, pre-portioned potato salad, cookie, muffin. So at the end, the only thing the participant had to touch was the box full of their food, and then they grabbed a drink and went back to their table. So there was no self-serving or touching any type of utensils. It was all provided by the catering staff.
Nice. Darlene, I had a question for you. For your whole series of events during the week, during spring quarter, you guys seem to have a lot of things really put into place. Were there any backup plans if kind of stuff went south? And if so, what were those?
Well, Recreation was already doing all of their recreation activities outside. So that was already in place. So we only introduced 12 in-person activities. I guess we would have gone to virtual or taken them off the table, but we just kept hoping we'd push through. At a minimum, we probably would have stayed with distribution, allowing folks to pick up a painting kit or a food pickup or something. We could have allowed that to happen, but luckily that didn't happen, and we were able to have some, we did a movie outside on the grass. We did some community service cleanup, some beach cleanup. So we were able to do some things, and we're very lucky.
Yeah, I agree. I think
we masked. too.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the student body was really willing to participate safely, and everyone wanted to be safe. And I think that was a huge push to everything being communicated clearly, and, you know, information being communicated as well.
Yeah, and I think too, what helped was that our campus was a vaccination site. So we did a vaccination site on campus, as well as work with the San Diego Padres, and we did vaccination outside. That started in, I believe, January of 2021. And then staff, students were able to volunteer. And if you volunteered early on, you could get vaccinated. So our staff got vaccinated in, I believe, February of this year. And then it became available to all students and staff, and is still available to all of our staff on campus.
Yeah, that's right. Well, it looks like we're wrapping up our questions here. Anyone else want to jump in? Feel free to take yourself off mute or share in the conversation if you had any insight or fun little anecdotes to these presentations. We'd love to hear from you. I mean, I love seeing all the smiling picture faces as well, but and if not, I'll pause for just a moment, just in case. Open mid chat here. Nothing? No?
Well, thank you, Adrienne.
Yeah, thanks everyone. I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Jessica to take us away.
Thank you so much. That was just an amazing presentation. Thank you so much to our Day 14. As we come to a close on our 9th annual conference, we encourage you to post about your takeaways from this year's conference and reach out to all of our members within the CSU-EPN social media network. Sorry about that. Finally, representatives from our sponsors will be available for you to meet and speak to in our virtual exhibit hall up from 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. this afternoon. Links for the booths will be in the emails you received. Don't miss this unique opportunity to connect with them. And with that, thank you so much for logging on to today's session. A recording of today's event will be posted on the CSU-EPN YouTube channel, and the link will be shared with you shortly. We would now like to invite everyone to join us for the awards ceremony at 1:30 p.m. To see all the rising awards. Thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you at next year's conference.